The City Council Committee on Ordinances, Licenses, and Legal Affairs, co-posted with the Committee of the Whole, will meet in person on Thursday, or is meeting in person on Thursday, November 6, 2025 at 6 p.m. for the purpose of discussing number 462, zoning ordinance relative to Smart Growth Overlay District. This meeting was held in City Council Chambers, 93 Washington Street. In attendance, we have Councilor Jerslow, and all other members of the committee are present. We also have from the Committee of the Whole, Councilor Watson-Felt, Councilor Merkel, Council President Prosnewski, Councilor Harvey. From the city, we have from the Planning Department, Elena Eimert and Amanda Chincola, and we have Jason Etheridge from LifeBridge. So this meeting was sent to committee we already have, just as a reminder, we have had first passage on the Smart Growth Overlay District. So we are towards the end of the line on this here. Received first passage of the last council meeting. Was sent to committee for any outstanding questions that councilors had. And then we'll go, if this committee chooses to send it back to the full council, we'll go back to the full council for final passage next week. So I'll start with the two questions that I had, which was number one on, are we okay? Okay. The first question was around the LifeBridge board, and that was a question that I think over the last few years has been brought up by neighbors a couple times, just wanting to ensure that Salem residents have a voice on that board. So if you're ready right now, Jason, I'll call you up and you can sort of discuss that, and then we'll move on to the other question.
Thank you, councilors. And yes, this has been a question we've addressed several times, but it's always been LifeBridge's goal and desire to have local representation. I actually did a double check last week and can say that we've always had at least one member from the city of Salem on our board of directors. It is our goal to continue to do so. We would love more than one. And to show how meaningful this is to us, the board is willing to pass a resolution to submit into its minutes, backing up the fact that we do desire and would continue to desire someone from Salem on the board of directors at all times for our organization.
Any questions from the council? Councilor Watson-Felt.
Thank you, Chair. Not being a member of the committee, Jason, would you be willing to further stipulate that it be a member of the immediate neighborhood?
I would not at this time, but the immediate neighborhood would never be precluded from that. It would be great if it was from the immediate neighborhood, but we'd like it to be from the entire, we serve the entire city, so we would like it to be someone from Salem.
Thank you for clarifying.
Any other questions from the council? Yeah, I guess for a clarifying, from my perspective, I think that we, as a council, are frequently dealing with big problems and looking for partners on those problems. So here we have a situation where LifeBridge has been a partner to the city of Salem. We are left with limited options in dealing with the homelessness issue that is a nationwide issue, and LifeBridge is one of the groups that does help and does do good work. And just selfishly, I'm trying to get everything possible out of this situation for the city of Salem, ensuring that we have representation on that board, ensuring that Salem residents are taken care of, because this is as we look at this issue, it's not a national problem. We look at it as a local problem, and we want to make sure that we're able to address it. So, but did you mention that you would have that to us for the next council meeting?
Yeah, I would like to have something in writing to you all for the next council meeting. Absolutely.
Any other questions for Jason? Councilor Prosnewski.
Thank you, Chair, not being a member of the committee. To Jason. Jason, how was the board picked? What's the...
There's a nomination process.
What's the process?
Yeah, so the nomination process anyone could be nominated by just about anyone. A lot of the times it's me or a fellow board member looking for the right partner within the communities. We go through a nomination process where, first initial conversation, sometimes they submit a resume or their background, why they would want to be involved in a place like LifeBridge, and they actually are invited to attend a board meeting in which they get to learn a little bit more about the board and the organization. They then go somewhere else for a little while, and then we sort of talk about it as a board, and then we come back in the next meeting and vote whether or not they could be on the board of directors. So that's pretty typical of the selection process for a board of directors.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Any other questions for Jason about this topic or any other topic while he's up here? All right, seeing none. Thank you, Councilor Morsillo.
Yeah.
Okay. This might be a question for Amanda, actually, and this has come, or Elena, and this has come up before with other housing like this, and it has to do with the longevity of the original 70% Salem preference. Does that continue as people move out? Does that 70% remain?
Here's the next question. No, please.
Thank you. So that does tip into the next question that Councillor Hapworth had provided to the Planning Department. So that pertains to local preference. Under Massachusetts state regulations, that 70% local preference, which is the maximum allowed by Massachusetts state law, and Salem has been successful in achieving that 70% given our local context, but that 70% is only applied at initial occupancy. However, after that time, there is a wait list that is created, and so individuals that apply for local preference who are not selected into that 70% of units where it is initially applied will have the opportunity to be eligible for units down the line, but the local preference does not apply in perpetuity.
Okay.
And I will also say this is perhaps laid out in more granular detail in the letter that was provided to you all, and that will be made available on Imagine Salem as well.
And just to clarify here, so this is, for everybody at home, this is not a decision made by Harbor Light or LifeBridge. This is the City of Salem that submits this, and that the state would not likely accept a requirement that this be local preference after the initial lottery. Am I understanding that correctly?
So I'll take the second question first. So under Massachusetts state law, local preference is only applied at initial occupancy. There exists no path currently for it to be applied in perpetuity. The decision to pursue local preference is oftentimes a joint decision between a project and the municipality, and that request is detailed in what is called an affirmative fair housing and marketing plan, and that is submitted by the project proponent detailing how they would lottery and fill those affordable units, and local preference would be included in that document. That's submitted to the city, and then we would agree to that, and then it's submitted to the state for their approval.
Any questions on this topic? I guess just a follow-up question there is after that initial lottery and say 2 years down the line, what is I don't know if this is more of a question for Andrew possibly, but I don't know if anyone is able to answer this. What is the process for filling those units as they become open? What is the preference, or how does that work? Is it a first come, first served, or what is the?
So I would probably defer that to Andrew because they've been through that process functionally, but our understanding is there is that wait list that's created when the units are initially filled, and that they try to use that wait list to select future tenants. But I would defer that to Andrew DeFranza of Harbor Light Homes for a more detailed answer.
Any other questions? Councilor Merkel.
Thank you, Chair Hapworth. I want to say I appreciate you having this meeting tonight and addressing these questions. I think we do want to make sure that everybody has the answers to all the questions. And I also do appreciate wanting to see Salem residents on the board. A good friend of mine currently serves on their board, and being on the boards of some nonprofits, especially when serving vulnerable communities, it's really critical they have the trust of the clients and the guests that they serve. So I do really appreciate this. I do want to express some mild concern here, for what we're asking of LifeBridge. Zoning, we all know, is about the usage, not the users. This request that it does be put in writing for the makeup of their board is beyond the scope of zoning. It's unusual, and we are having the conversation because of the guests that they serve, and they are a private nonprofit, not a government entity. So just having this conversation, based on that, when zoning again is about usage, not users. Historically, when that happens, it's been a slippery slope. So I fully support wanting, our Salem residents and the commitment on the board and the commitment that they've had consistently for that to happen. I do appreciate that very much, but I just wanted to put that out there and respectfully. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? So I want to ensure that, this has been a long process with LifeBridge and Harbor Light and the city. Want to ensure that we are the representatives of the city of Salem. Want to make sure that we all feel like all of our questions were answered and that we're not walking out of this saying that questions were left unanswered or there was stuff left on the table. So if there are no other questions, just want to, Councilor Marcello.
Always questions. Sorry. Jason. One of the outstanding questions, again, seems to be around where the executives or administration are going to be located.
Sure.
And the reason I'm bringing that up again tonight is because from the beginning of this project, it's always been said that you're consolidating all of your operations into the one location. And so you will be there, you'll see what's going on outside, you'll be seeing what's going on in the neighborhood. And so there's, okay, I don't know where all the different stories are coming from, I have to say that.
Sure.
But there seems to be some confusion as to where the executives or the administrators are going to be located here or in Beverly. And while it's not under the purview of zoning, I just want to start by saying the zoning is for a site project. And so that's why I think it merits some questions. So
The intention has always been for, well, let me start over. My office was at 56 Margin Street, so was several of my key staff, administration, so to speak. The reason we initially moved over to Essex Street first was because we ran out of space, hence why we need a redevelopment. So it's always been the intention for the administrative staff to come back on site once the new development is built. And, I think, I don't want to say exactly who, but I do have a robust philanthropy team, fundraisers. They may, for example, stay in Beverly, but as of right now, my intention with any other executive staff would to come back to the Salem location once the property's been redeveloped.
Okay, so the information that the executive staff will be moving to Beverly.
Yeah, well, it's already inaccurate because, for example, our vice president of program and services, who would be considered executive staff, his office is in 56 Margin Street, and so yeah, that's probably not the case. We will be staffed with executive staff at 56 Margin Street.
Okay, that's great. And again, I think not only does it go back to the beginnings of this whole project, but also having the executive staff there, I think, is important for the neighborhood. Just to know that you're seeing the day-to-day activity in the neighborhood also, and I think it does brings some comfort, I think, to the neighborhood to know that.
I think there are more steps to that as well. There are ways to integrate and to be more present, even absent a physical office space. So I think we can treat that. We hear that, but to be very specific, at this point, it is our desire to come back to that facility once it's redeveloped. So we understand.
Councilor Cohen and then Councilor Harvey. Councilor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair, not being a member of the committee. Jason, question, is LifeBridge basically, does it deal with actual families, or is it basically just people with alcoholism or substance abuse? Like, for instance, this facility over here. Because I think part of the problem is everybody looks at homelessness as the people that are hanging out in Riley Plaza. But it's not. There's people behind that you don't see. You're not going to see a 9-year-old kid that's homeless hanging out at Riley Plaza. So it's a big, I don't even know how to phrase it, but it's almost like a very misleading to the community about homelessness, because all they ever see are the people out at Riley Plaza or camping out in, behind City Hall, for instance, and stuff like that. So how much does LifeBridge help actual families with children and stuff like that?
So we do not serve homeless families in our shelter, and that is not, there are two different models in the Commonwealth. Family homelessness is actually managed by the Commonwealth. So if you're a homeless family, you present yourself to the Department of Transitional Assistance, and you're placed into a shelter anywhere within the Commonwealth, right? That's when we talk about a right to shelter state that has been, not so recently, but not that long ago, was very relevant. We always had a place to put families, and that was always a centralized system through the Commonwealth. We are not a right to shelter state for individuals. So you see organizations choose one or the other typically. You either do homeless families or homeless individuals. LifeBridge works with homeless individuals. Now, that doesn't negate your other point. I think there's a lot of misconceptions about homelessness. And, I hear very often it's folks who have substance abuse disorder or behavioral mental health. We're simply a microcosm of society. We have a lot of people who live at LifeBridge now who are well integrated, working, who are part of families, right? They're just not with their family at the moment. That's why reunification is so important for us. And that's where some of our biggest successes are, is getting people back with their family. But yeah, there's a lot of misinformation about the people we serve. And sure, I think most folks' interaction with homeless individuals is going to be when they're walking through Riley Plaza, for example. I think it's inappropriate then to come back and say, well, that's every homeless person I've ever, that exists, is that experience, right? So our job as an organization is to advocate and to inform and to educate and try to get out there that the people we serve are us. It's our family members, it's our neighbors, and there are a lot of reasons why people end up at LifeBridge. The idea that there's the drunk homeless guy under the bridge, that's not it. That's never been it, but that's the one that persists for some reason. But we have it's mostly vulnerable people who are one or two terrible situations from losing just about everything they have. They used to say, you're 1 or 2 paychecks away. So it's not really that. It's usually 1 or 2 situations away from finding yourself without a home. So I think the statement was, the perception of homelessness, we need to work on that because it is out there. It is happening. People are becoming homeless at a faster rate, and they're not the people you think they are. And I don't mean you, I just mean society in general. It's a lot of folks come to us with no substance abuse disorder, with no behavioral mental health issues. Does that mean it won't happen over time? No. I mean, these are really vulnerable people in tough situations. So I hope that clarifies.
Thank you. I guess the second part of that question would be, if per se, just a woman and child came into LifeBridge, I'm assuming you guys would point them in the right direction 100%.
We do as much of that work as we do the work with the people that live with us or come to our day center. Our day center that is in the current St. Mary's building will see that's not limited to homeless individuals, but very often we're a point of contact for people like that, and our job is to get them where they belong. So it's very often we're getting people down to it's a Shetland Park is where DTA is, to Congress Street, or figuring out where connecting with our other community partners, but absolutely. People who come to LifeBridge for something are not typically turned away without some type of resource, even if it's not from us.
All right, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that so that the people don't get the wrong impression.
Oh, thank you. It's great.
The situation's about.
Great clarification. Thank you.
Councilor Cohen.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to respond to Councilor Harvey's question, but Jason did. But now that Andrew DeFrenz is here, I was going to see if we could suspend the rules and have him come up and talk about the 70% rule.
No rules to suspend here, but if Andrew would like to come up, and the question that was posed was around the 70% that I think was covered pretty well by Elena. But my follow-up question was, what is the process for placing somebody after that initial round? Say a year from now, 2 years from now, is there a preference system, or how does that work?
So I'm not suspended. The rules are not suspended. There are no suspensions. So, You can imagine I might have a memory of that. My apologies if for some reason I thought 6:30. I thought I was early for the first time in 25, but I'm holding my record strong. Right on time. So the wait list. So we can talk about how the lottery works, or you want to specifically focus on the wait list?
So we're pretty comfortable with that 70% to start, but then after this, into the future, I mean, obviously we would prefer, at least I would prefer, to see a preference for Salem residents. That doesn't seem like it's necessarily possible here, but what does that process look like?
Yeah, so I think what it can be a little complex, but I'll do my best to sort of walk you through it. So the wait list will get sequenced based on the applicants the first time around. So if there are 500 applicants, right, the first chunk of people, the preference will work. The local preference is in play. There are some other preferences that are in play that are federal, specifically around ADA units. And so that's why I said the math is not exactly pure, because you can't have a local preference on a federally restricted unit. So if it's an accessible unit, the preference doesn't apply. And so that's a slightly different animal. But once you get those in, everybody who has applied then in the lottery got drawn in an order, right? So they exist in that order sort of forever and ever, amen. So however, if there's 450 people left on the wait list based on the draw, that's the order they'll be in. Now, there are some, and so when there's a unit that's open, any unit, it'll go to that list, and those folk, whoever is one on that list, will get the first offer.
Just jump in real quick. Are they on that list in order of any local preference in the future, or no? Okay.
No, the local preference applies to there's an earlier screening that does the local preference, right? And then those folks are preferenced for occupancy, and then there's sort of the general list. Now, people can be in both if they're local. So actually, local folks can get drawn in either pool. So we've seen people without, quote unquote, people who are local without local preference still get into a building. So you can actually do better than 70% because you get pulled twice. So you have a statistical, your lottery balls are more often in the jar, as it were. But yeah, that list just exists in sequence at that point. Now, there are some nuances. For example, if there's again, back to the ADA units, there aren't as many nuances in this case because the units are all very similar and the occupants are similar. Sometimes you'll have multiple bedroom types, and then that gets more complicated because you might have somebody with a bigger household gets rights to a bigger unit if it opens. But these are all single units, right? So if unit 1 goes and unit 1 is there, they get the unit. Now, if unit 1 gets pulled and it's an ADA unit, the first person in the sequence who has an ADA need would go. So that person could be number 406. Right, if it's an ADA unit and they jump the whole line because it's an accessible unit and they need the accessibility. So that's sort of the way that works. But barring that, probably in this case, there can occasionally be units that also have sort of communication variables. So there are units for somebody who might be deaf or blind where they have braille on the doors and flashers. So we'll put those in so that they can accommodate a sensory challenge either way. Similar to the ADA units, that would trump access if that's the next unit available. So that's essentially how the math works. So you have sort of then 3 ways, if you have more time, as it relates to the local preference. That's the extent of the local preference will apply on access. The wait list will apply on an ongoing basis. One dominant variable, that means that everybody should apply in the beginning because your chances of being in there are much, that once you get past sort of what you can compel, there's the practicality, which is a lot of people will end up on the list who are local because that's generally the way that it works, meaning functionally. More people are interested, more people know about it, even though you have to communicate it broadly to prevent segregation and discrimination. You're broadly disseminating that information. You're going to have a lot of people on that initial pull that are local. And so that's going to statistically always improve their chances because anybody who's applying behind them will go to the back. So if you have, let's say there are 300 people left on the list and 250 of them are Salem affiliated, sprinkled through their thing, that essentially means you're going to pull a Salem person almost all of the time for 10 years, or whatever for whatever the duration is. Now that's not a restriction, meaning that's not like compulsory. There's not a way, it's just the way that the functionality will play because of the draw. But people who apply, probably what you would hope would happen would be people who apply at the end of the line, whoever the first Salem person is on the list, you want it to function like the ADA unit functions, but that only functions on the initial pull. I will say that the state has gotten communication from multiple other places, specifically gateways, where there was a concern about displacement and gentrification concerns. Not the same issue here, but similar in terms of a high-order ethical problem. So there's concerns that the gateways are being gentrified so severely that local preference should continue to apply to prevent the displacement of original residents, workforce, et cetera. And that conversation has not been perfect, and there's not a way to do it yet, but I've been in the room when there's been those debates. So there are you could apply a similar logic here, which is, and I think you and I, Councilor, have had this conversation, where you say, look, we're trying to solve a local problem. We're making local housing that is local responsibility and challenges. We want to make sure that the people who are here get access first. You could try it, but we don't have the authority to do that out. The state would have to make that allowance. And that's not simple. Like, that would be hard to do.
Councilor Harvey.
Please.
Thank you, Chair, not being a member of the committee. So, Andrew,
Yeah.
first 70% are picked. Let's just say there's another 5% on the top of that wait list.
Yep.
Are Salem residents.
Yeah.
They're not going to get overlooked because they're Salem residents. They will automatically go in, and then we'll have 75% in. So there is no restriction.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, you could.
A number of how many residents.
You got it.
Salem residents
You
can
got
be in there.
it. You got it.
So in theory, if everybody signed up at the same time.
You could get everybody.
Residents, you could end up with 100%.
Correct.
Okay.
So there's the practicality, which I like where your head is with that. That is like, how do I make this work best for the local goals? And then there's the regulatory. The regulatory box is the 70%. It's sort of stiff and functions that way, but you want to pound the daylights out of that wait list, because that will improve that'll be, especially on Jason's side, outreach and support, especially in this kind of a context for applications, will be critical.
That was my next question.
Huge.
So if Jason knew we maxed out our 70%, and I don't want to make it sound like, but if you guys put the outreach out there before the place even opens.
Have to.
So the Salem residents are going to know
You got it.
that, all right, we need to be first on the list.
Right.
And then basically, because you're two separate entities, you're kind of partnered up, and you can actually
Right.
Advocate for people to sign up for it.
You got it.
Okay.
But we're going to have, it will be work. Like, we've done a bunch of these and with different really vulnerable populations, and sometimes, like my crew, and in this case it'll be both our crews, are going way intentionally sort of above and beyond to make sure people make it through the application process, because you need paperwork, and you need a birth certificate, and you need a social security, stuff that maybe doesn't seem like it's hard, but it's hard. If you are living in a tent, you're having a hard time. So we're going to have to be like out where people are and helping them access documentation in advance and get an ID, and like, it's going to be a massive community lift, but that's the way to do it.
Councilor Watson-Felt.
Thanks. This has been super helpful. It did raise a question for me, Andrew, just around how you pivot when regulatory changes occur.
Mm-hmm.
So this conversation that's ongoing now around gateway cities, if a local preference were to become, if there was a pathway, right? Because that's how Elena had referenced it before. If there was a pathway to ensuring local preference on an ongoing basis, but now you have this 500-person wait list, which may be comprised of a mix of people from all around.
Yep.
How do you manage that when a unit comes up? How do you have to pivot?
Yeah, so typically, and this is more experiential than it is prescriptive, what we've seen from, the state through the Department of Housing and Livable Communities has a fair housing division, and they have a couple of attorneys, who we know pretty well. And so our experience with them is they really are pretty firm about, if the list went out for the available public resource, the premise, I think, being that everybody in the state funded it, right? That's sort of the logic. They don't like to mess with an existing list. Like they're really uncomfortable with it. So I think the odds of us getting the original list managed, like if they said all of a sudden, yeah, it's a gateway, you can do it. For homeless, like for example, they could put a provision in that said for homeless projects as an incentive that communities are going to host, you get local preference forever. More power, or more preference than 70, they could do that. If they did it after the wait list is set, I strongly doubt they would let you go back. So in some ways, if we're going to try to make this advocacy, it should be before. Like we have a little time, right? That wait list and all that stuff is not going to get set for a couple of years. So if we wanted to advocate at the state level for, gateway homeless projects having a different local preference mechanism, that it would be important to do it sooner than later. But like I said, I've been in that conversation in the last year, and it sort of worked, but there were some, it's not perfect. We did it for we just finished a project for a youth agent out of foster care in Lynn, and that's where the conversation happened there. So that would have to be, sort of the mayor would have to take that to I can participate, but it would not be looked on well if I initiated that conversation, if that makes sense.
Councilor Marcelo.
So is there currently legislation that's being talked about with this, or is it just okay.
No, it could be suggested, for example.
Yeah, okay.
It's probably less likely, this is editorial, right? It's less likely to be legislative, it's more likely to be regulatory. But it's the question of how the attorneys are interpreting, which is not a dig, fair housing law. And and they're pretty serious about that. And so sometimes we bump into challenges when you're trying to do a thing for a specific population, and so occasionally there's a rub there. So it probably wouldn't be legislative, though it could be. My guess is it would be a hard rock to push uphill unless you put it inside of a different bill, as sort of an amendment of some sort. That's possible. I would try regulatory first.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Any other general questions? Okay, well, thank you, Andrew, appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. We'll hang around just in case. Yeah.
Is it a motion? Real quick before that, just wanted to actually recognize and appreciate Councilor Harvey's question and statement around the face of homelessness, which I think is the thing that we have been struggling with throughout this entire process, and the thing that specifically Councilor Watson-Felt and Councilor Morcillo have been struggling through and bearing the brunt of, because there's a very visible face of homelessness, and it is folks who are struggling the absolute most, who are in Riley Plaza, on the South River. That is tragic, but is not the typical face of homelessness. And I think, like many of our family members have probably been homeless at one point in their lives, or would be classified that way. It is invisible often. There are Salem's public school kids that are homeless right now, and I think if folks saw how crushing this is and the face of that, I think that there would be probably more support for projects like this, because we don't want folks to end up in that situation that we see people in Riley Plaza in. We want people to have housing. We want people to have shelter when they need it, and I think this is a project like this. 70% of these units are going to go like homes, these aren't shelter beds, these are homes that Harbor Light is creating here, are going to go to Salem residents. So I think these are the things we're trying to do here as a council. So again, I just appreciate the way that conversation went. Any other questions before we get to Councilor Cohen's motion? Councilor Cohen.
I do want to make two comments before my motion, and one is a slight response to that, is that I said this at the last council meeting, homelessness is a citywide problem, and Riley Plaza, the transition center overflow shelters in Ward 5, at one point we had 70 people housed there, managed by LifeBridge. Now it's 25, pretty much all people referred by LifeBridge or the police department. At today's homeless task force meeting, it actually came up that that people who are not living inside, the growth has exponentially been off of Canal Street and Broadway. But I did want to say something as a response to this preference thing, and that is that this reinforces the value of having LifeBridge and Harbor Light in the same place with supportive services, because they are interacting with people at the overflow shelter and in LifeBridge, and they are going to, hopefully, as they're already doing, because at one point Jason told me that at one point last year, more people were transitioning into housing from the transition center overflow shelter than from LifeBridge itself. But I do want to make a motion that we refer this back to the full council with a positive recommendation.
Second.
Councilor Cohen moves to refer this back to the full council for second passage with a positive recommendation, seconded by Councilor Varela. Any other discussion? Seeing none of the committee, all those in favor? Any opposed? The matter carries. All right, one more motion. Councilor Varela.
Thank you, Chair. Motion to adjourn.
Councilor Varela moves to adjourn. All those in favor? And we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.